what is it for me that makes somebody a great All Black?
What a wizard that they're running this is. Can he make it? 5 metre shot, but he's made it. That is staggering stuff.
A great All Black, I don't think is ever satisfied with where they're at. You're at the top of your game every single time you go out there.
You'll know what he's thinking, you know what he wants, you can see it in his eyes. He's uncompromising in his mission for greatness.
But to be a great All Black, you've got to be driven. You've got to be wanting to be better every day, and you've got to be tough.
Bunce, who's a star in the game. Support coming from Randall. He might go all the way, Frank Bunce. That is one of the most marvellous tries you'll ever see.
Always stands out against the very best opposition.
Nonu gets it. Now Nonu.
He's got Dick.
Israel Dick. Oh, what a try.
Longevity.
Making an impact at the highest level, at the elite level.
Martin's a brilliant individual try.
Man, I want to be like that person. Well, I want to do what he's doing.
Zealand Rugby, drop kick, and he's got it! Zealand Rugby, Carter with his pace, and the skipper is in to score the first try.
Someone, can make a difference in a game, but also change the way teams have to play or play against you.
Away goes Bowden Barrett. Now he sets it up for Ben Smith.
And the people that think just getting in the team's good enough and, I'll just be here until one day I'm not, they're the ones that just come and go. But the guys that get there and actually go, right, now I'm here, it's about what I do from here that will determine what my legacy is.
Now he can kick and chase. He leads the charge. Oh, Jeff Wilson, superb.
And can do the things that he makes himself famous for against the best other players in the world.
When they're consistently good, they get opportunities to actually have influence in the game. So it might be one or two things, but they don't miss those opportunities.
Bowden Barrett, what a try!
The other ones that start to be talked about after years have gone by, they put in that sort of category.
It's how they are. They hate losing. More than that, they hate letting themselves down, they hate letting the team down.
When people say to me, do you miss it now? I say, no. No, because I had the greatest time of my life, but it took everything out of me. To be the best you can be, it has to be the most important thing in your life. And as All Blacks, we like making sacrifices because we play for the greatest club in the world.
Yeah, you think about the debate and the discussion that's going to go on over the next 8 weeks, JK, and it's where do you start? It's not an easy job, but I mean, let's have our discussion. We've been lucky enough, all of us, to play with great players. Hannah, for you, what is it that sets players apart? We've heard from so many great players just then, individuals, coaches, but for you, the some you've played with, what made them great?
Yeah, and look, I'll speak to what Richie said, being consistently good week in, week out. At international level, you're lucky enough to turn up and just do your job, but being the best on the field at your job and then bringing your X factor as to why you've made the black jersey.
Sometimes, though, challenging, JK, for a number of players who pick up injuries earlier on in their career, the fact that they were wonderful for a number of seasons and then there are things that have held them back, but you've seen the talent, you've seen the ability, you've seen so many players with potential. What sets the great players apart for you?
When talent meets work rate and sacrifice and discipline, I think that's the real difference for me. And then the ability in a moment to put your hand up. So the team's in trouble, I'll do that. And for me, just the incredible sacrifice off the field that a lot of people don't see, both mentally and physically and family-wise, and I think all those combinations. But I think if you think about a moment in a game of rugby where you're under the pump, the opposition's great. That's the thing that people don't realise, especially when you're a supporter of the All Blacks. You sort of expect us to win all the time, but when you're out there and you're under the pump and you know that the game's in the balance, and one of those players does something special.
So, Hannah, where does leadership sit for you then when you're having these discussions? Because there are so many talented players, but there are others who have almost changed the course of the All Blacks through their ability to lead on and off the field. Is that an important part of it? It's an important part for me when I think of changing an environment and the way they can inspire other players around them.
Yeah, it's important. It's not important for all, but it's important for a special few that need to lead the group. And whether that's through actions or whether that's through words, absolutely critical You don't get a good team without that leadership group.
I'm just asking, is it a plus? So would there be another player that was probably better, but if you added the captaincy and leadership, does that make you better?
And you imagine when we go through this group, you think about all of the players that have been in the All Black jersey, JK, absolutely, when you're having to differentiate between players, because the hardest thing about this is, right, yeah, but I think when you're talking about through the eras, and you're enjoying inspiring performances and moments that you're talking about, for me, the players always have one special moment that stands out, where they've been at the very, very top, where they've had to perform, Hannah, where it's been the difference between their team winning and losing. There are not many great players that haven't had those moments. I think they're critical when you're trying to separate guys. Yeah,
the big moment players, and I think the legends of the game will go down and will remember those players for those moments.
And I think one of the reasons I'm really looking forward to this is hopefully the fans at home, you want to get involved in this, because it's through the generations for me, JK, because it would be quite easy to remember the last 25 years because the game is exposure, the amount of games, the test matches that they play. JK, there are so many. You go back to the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, some of our legends of the game. It's going to be hard to compare, but we have to give them the right justice, the honesty, the fact that they did change the game in those early days.
Oh, I tell you, it's special in my upbringing. I tell you, Dad would let me stay up. We used to get up and watch games at 3 o'clock. You know, you'd get chips and you'd sit up in your pajamas and you just couldn't, invariably you'd fall asleep and Dad would have to wake you up. But monumental things growing up, you know, we didn't have anything else. We didn't have cell phones or anything. That was what we did. And I can remember, like for me, Brian Williams, although we didn't have to get up that late, in South Africa in '72 was unbelievable for me. And I'll never forget, you know, a 10-foot sidestep that I was just in awe of my whole life.
We're going to get to the outsides. We're a few weeks away from that, but we had to get a panel together to look through the ages and to decide who the top players were to debate and give you an opportunity to remember and who was the greatest of the greatest in the All Black jersey. And we asked the voice of the All Blacks, Grant Nisbet, to run that discussion.
Kia ora and welcome to New Zealand's Greatest 15 on The Breakdown. Here at Sky Sport, we're trying to find the best ever All Blacks team with help from a vote from the Kiwi public. I'm Grant Nisbet, and over the next 8 weeks, I'm going to be joined by rugby broadcasters Ken Laban, Ricky Swinell and Phil Gifford in our search to find the best ever New Zealand rugby team. Let's look into how we'll make this process work. We have a short list in every position. We'll debate until we find our winner. Then we'll combine it with the public vote to see who makes up the greatest 15. We'll reveal the winners in positional groups, front row, locks, loose forwards and so on over the next 8 weeks. OK, well, let's get into it. We're going to start at loose head prop.
My pick would be Steve McDowall, but Steve McDowall to me was the forerunner of the athletic and dynamic prop that we see today.
And then Tony Woodcock, 118 test, a Rugby World Cup final try. We will never forget that. And just that old school attitude in a modern era for Tony Woodcock. But in saying all of that, I'm going to agree with Phil and I say Steve McDowall too.
Woody, or Tony Woodcock, his role in the professional era, his role in World Cup finals, his immense strength and power with the ball and without the ball, in terms, especially at scrum time, was immense. And I think, obviously, he'll be on a lot of people's minds.
When he was loose head prop, the scrum didn't go far, did it? But I think what we should really do is leave it to the public.
Righto.
And they'll sort it out. But we've got Steve McDowall and we've got Tony Woodcock. What do you think? We're up to hooker now, the greatest ever hooker. In the list we've got Ron Hemi, Sean Fitzpatrick, Kevin Mialamu and Dane Coles.
For me, it's Sean Fitzpatrick. He changed the role. He became that fourth loose forward. Obviously, he was an outstanding leader of a team in that 96 team as well that did something unexpected and for the first time. So, yeah, as much as I love Kevin Mialamu as a person, as a great bloke and a great All Black, I'm going Sean Fitzpatrick.
Ken?
Kevin Mialamu, hands down. For me, I remember Sir Graham Henry asked one day if the All Black forwards pack was trapped in a cage with a tiger, who would be the last two standing? And he said Rodney So'oialo and Kevin Mialamu.
I have to go with Sean Fitzpatrick. In South Africa, for example, they hated him so much that I remember talking to his mother during the 1996 tour, and she said, do you think they'll actually go and hurt Sean when he's off the field? Because Fitzpatrick, I think, had absolutely everything. He was a slightly chubby-cheeked little boy when he played in the Baby Blacks, but he was as tough as nails, and he just got tougher and tougher as he went on. So for me, it has to be Sean Fitzpatrick.
I think we're agreed. Our greatest contender at All Black hooker is Sean Fitzpatrick. Now we're looking at tight head prop, and the players we've got nominated here: Kevin Skinner, Ken Gray, Owen Franks and Olo Brown. Boy, what a lineup. Righto, Phil, let's start with you.
I just think Ken Gray, just looking at the man, was possibly the scariest looking person to ever play in the front row for the All Blacks, and the way he played, I think he lived up to what he looked like.
There's like a mystique about there, isn't there, about front rowers in particular, and there's one on that list that I think has a mystique, and that is Olo Brown.
Yes.
And I want to know if any of you guys ever have actually interviewed him, because infamously didn't give very many interviews. So have you ever talked to him? Have you ever got him on tape?
Oh, subsequently.
Well, it was more than very quiet. As I understand it, I remember trying to get interviews with him when he was a player, and I don't know anybody that when he was a player, he was like Joe. He didn't give a single interview, as far as I'm aware.
I'm going to go for Ken Gray. In my view, you know, the great front rowers in terms of tight head props, Ken Gray.
Well, it was a great field, it really was. But our nomination for the greatest of all tight head props for the All Blacks is Ken Gray.
So you've heard the expert panel giving their thoughts. Agree or disagree? We'd love to get your vote on who you think are our front row go-tos. Head to our Sky Facebook page and make your selection. The winners will be revealed next week on The Breakdown. And I have to throw in Fitzy in there for me, not for his might and his muscle. He was uncompromising, not for his yap and his chat. He would put fear into the opposition and at times his own players, but most of all, he really was the unofficial TMO of the 90s.
You're 100% right. I was fortunate enough to play with Fitzy at the end of his career. JK, you were there for the
I was
start.
unfortunate enough to room with him.
I don't think I ever had the pleasure of that. He was the captain, so he got his own room.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that in your day. But you think about those names there and the players that we're so qualified, aren't we? Us three backs here talk about the front rows. But
I mean, already for me, Kevin Skinner, legend against the South Africans, changed side because he was a New Zealand champion boxer. So I think that generation's hard because for me, they were like these mystical people who had this aura about them. And I remember meeting Kevin a few times and, you know, he's a bit like the others, pretty scary.
Yeah. Well, players there that changed the game, and they talked about Fitzy, but Dane Coles, you'd have to say, it's the same conversation. You think about the role that he played, and he looked as though he was a midfield back. You can remember him bursting through the middle of the park. I mean, it's obvious there are players through the course of history, the way the game has changed. We've led that change, Hannah. Is that probably what makes this discussion even more difficult when you start going through the eras?
Yeah, and those players coming into the professional era and how that changed for them. And Dane Coles is a great person to speak about, right? Runs like a back, tackles like a forward, goes into those dark places that you need front rowers to go.
You look at those players that you've played with, the likes of a Farrah Palmer. Does she fit the bill for that? The fact was she the player that influenced your team and led from the front?
Yeah, she was a great leader of the game. She certainly wasn't the biggest front rower that we had, but she put her body on the line every weekend.
And when you look at those players, JK, and you look at all of them, you know, that's what if All Black Rugby, you know, was built around, the fact that it started up front. That was when you're growing up, you had to thank them first. I know you might not have liked it, but the reason you're scoring so many tries, as I was, the fact that they were doing the work, you look at those names, that's maybe what set us apart. We win 77% of our test matches. They're the reason why.
Yeah, exactly. And I think at home, you should get involved, but the first thing you should do is write down what it means to you and why you think someone's different, because that's what I had to do. I think, you know, and I love Fitzy, very good mate of mine, but he changed the game. So if you write down exactly what it is, moments they've changed the game, it's really, really interesting and it gets really difficult.